Do you have any interest in doing quick fire on things like, you want to skip that?
You think it's value in doing that? I haven't got anything positive to say.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm delighted to have Hashan de Silva on the pod. I've known Hashan for a while. We talk a lot about biotech stocks and healthcare generally. And he's also recently launched a fund. So welcome, Hashan. Why don't you tell us what you're up to?
Thanks for having me, Michael. It's great to be here. So just to give you a quick background how I got to where I am. So grew up in Melbourne, moved to Sydney from med school. Realized I didn't want to practice medicine kind of very early on in the journey. So I left and worked at a drug company called Eli Lilly, which is now subsequently become the largest drug company in the world. And while I was at Lilly, I worked exclusively in the commercial side of the business. We did a few things that got me very interested in venture. And so with that, I decided to quickly go back to uni. I did a master's of finance. I did a CFA, and then I worked in a couple of investment banks as the healthcare analyst. So that's Macquarie Bank at COSA. Then I worked for a fund out of Hong Kong called Caspic as the head of healthcare, investing across Asia Pacific, but really in Australia and New Zealand. And we had a really good run. Well, we're at the fund on the healthcare side. It's big exits. The most notable one, the Neuron. And so I managed to spin out of that fund with the founder of that fund, without even seed capital, to start KPRX. And so that's kind of the short intro to where I got to in the fund. Today, we do private and public, biotech, medtech, medical devices, bigger focus on the private side. We tend to invest a bit later stage than your usual biotech VC. So we come in for a drug company at the phase 2 stage. For a medical device company, we're really post-approval and trying to help the company build reinvestment and commercialization. We're at larger checks and really taking the company transform the company from an R&D organization into a commercial organization is our focus.
Right. So when we Eli Lilly, because obviously that's become an incredibly topical company in the last couple of years with GLP-1 drugs.
Yeah. So Lilly 2011 to 2015. So I was there when we launched the first GLP-1 in the world. Brand name was Byetta, and it was a twice daily GLP-1. And at the time, funnily enough, we described weight loss as a side effect. For Byetta, there really wasn't material loss of weight, but there was some.
7-8%.
I think even less. I think around maybe 3 to 5%. But that could also be material for these diabetic patients, right? But it was really a side effect of the drug, as opposed to, I guess, why your patients are going to lose a whole bunch of weight. And I could say wholeheartedly that nobody really saw how big the GLP-1 class of drugs were going to get. And at the time, there was a theoretical side effect of, could you prescribe this for weight loss? Would that result in hypoglycemia or some kind of horrible side effect?
Not enough blood sugar. Just explain that.
Yeah. So when you use insulin in a healthy patient, the blood sugar levels drop, you get into a coma, and you die. It's a medical emergency. And that's why there's a lot of general practitioners aren't comfortable starting a patient on insulin. Now, we weren't sure that if we were going to use a GLP-1 in a patient with normal blood sugar levels, if that would result in something similar. Now, we just didn't have the data, right? And now we do. It's really crazy how far that's gone, right? And we were doing clinical trials with a drug called Bydureon, which was the first once weekly insulin, once weekly GLP-1 when I was just about to leave Lilly. And so Manjaro was still in phase 1. Ozempic, I believe, was just about to come into market.
Right. Yeah. I guess the history of that GLP-1 development has been trying to get it from, hourly or twice daily to weekly now. And then there's people with monthly and oral versions. Was it successful? Did it sell?
Byetta did. It definitely, it beat all of my internal forecasts by orders of advantage. I think it was the first year was a 10x beat. Because it was easy to use, patients lost weight. Because actually when a patient goes on insulin, when their diabetes gets really bad, they actually put on weight, which is kind of paradoxical. And doctors will see weight loss, particularly in type 2 patient cohort. That is the number one thing they want to see. And you saw that with Byetta. But around that same time, there's a bunch of very good drugs coming on. The glyphosate class, I believe they're called, the SLGT2 inhibitor class, that is now widely used in type 2 diabetes because it had cardioprotective effects as well as neuroprotective effects. That class of drugs is kind of viewed as a bit of a miracle drug for its wide-ranging range of effects in diabetes patients. And then you have the GLP-1. So treatment of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is coming massively low way in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw those charts where for the first time the number of obese people in the United States is actually dropping.
It's incredible.
It's actually finally having that effect on a population basis. And that's decades.
Yeah, I mean, I recently met a company. So there's a whole bunch of different ways people are looking at weight loss at the moment, many, many different ways. One of the most interesting ways for me is the mitochondrial uncoupler class. And so the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It produces what's called ATP that repowers everything we do is powered by ATP. And if you can find a way to uncouple that process, that means that the mitochondria becomes less efficient, therefore it uses more energy to produce the same amount of ATP. Historically, the view was that mitochondrial uncouplers have a very low therapeutic or small therapeutic window, because if you're not able to produce ATP, death occurs very quickly, seconds to minutes. And so that part of drug research has been stalled, but I recently had a company which has done some very intricate, elaborate science to create this molecule that is self-limiting, and there's a variety of reasons why that happens. But I had a kind of an interesting philosophical discussion with the founder about the societal impacts of a drug like this versus the drug like Ozempic. And then really the reason for that is if you have a drug that uncouples your mitochondria, effectively you can eat whatever you want and not put on weight. Now, what would that mean for a world of overconsumption, where if you could just sit around and eat 10,000 calories a day and still have a six-pack? Interestingly, the animal studies for a mitochondrial uncoupler, they took a weight loss but maintained a healthy lean mass, which is not what you see in the GLP-1. With GLP-1, you lose lean mass, you lose bone density, and you have all these issues in the elderly population, falls and broken bones. You don't see that at the moment with this mitochondrial uncoupler powers. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that while it's a good area of medicine, that I think there is considerations there on what the societal impacts would be. But also with GLP-1s, people are less impulsive. Evidence shows that there's less gambling, less alcohol consumption, whereas you wouldn't get this with the mitochondrial uncoupler.
The evidence is pretty strong. So the mitochondrial uncoupling, so what happens? You eat a bunch of sugar, your blood sugar goes out, and what, your cells don't use it? So it just doesn't go down that chain when it's stored into fat? How does it actually work?
Yeah, so the effects on blood sugar are less well established because the focus on these animal studies are really on weight and weight loss. So one of the side effects, theoretical side effects of mitochondrial uncoupler is increase in heat production. So if the mitochondria is working to produce ATP, but its uncoupled is less efficient, will it produce more heat? And obviously the human body can only go up so much in temperature before really bad side effects start. If you want to produce X amount of energy or X amount of output, you need 20% or 30% more input to put it. So instead of your food being stored as fat, it gets used because the mitochondria is less efficient than it was and so at rest, you're likely to burn more fat than you would without the mitochondrial uncoupler. So it's one of those drugs that people talked about in the, I guess, science fiction way that essentially you what you want and you wouldn't put on weight.
So I guess the history of this field, there's been a number of very effective weight loss drugs. They just come with horrific side effects, some of which were discovered quite late.
Yeah.
So that sounds pretty dangerous to me, but I know it's what is that company in there? Are they putting humans or are they just animal studies?
The most advanced company in the space is a company called Also Bio, listed, I believe it's listed on the NASDAQ, and they're at phase 2 stage. This particular company that I met out preclinical.
So they go to Also Bio?
It's still a lab. Their molecule is self-limiting, so no matter how much you dose, it gets to a certain point and the molecule doesn't work. And the way that happens is that the molecule is inactivated in the presence of high pH. And so when the mitochondria is working harder, the pH rises. And so the drug just turns itself off when it gets to a certain level. It's quiet. It's very clever, very clever science.
Is that an Australian company?
It is an Australian company.
And so in your fund, are you focusing entirely on Australia, New Zealand?
Yes, yeah. So we have the ability to invest globally, but we're not actively going out there for deal flow in other markets. And the reason for that is, in Australia, there is such limited capital for biotech medtech companies, where you can kind of want to hand the number of specialist funds that exist here. And so for us, without really having to do anything. We will see all the deal flow nearly all the deal flow that happens in Australia and New Zealand. If we were to go over to the US, where there's thousands upon thousands of healthcare investors, we will be seeing, the tuna that John West rejects, right? We'll be seeing the companies that all these other DCDs have met and rejected. So there'll be adverse selection bias on those deals. And what we find also in Australia is the stage of company that we like to invest in, the phase 2 stage, it's usually a Series A, Series B, Series C stage company. We get those companies in Australia for the same valuation you'd see a pre-seed company in the US, right? But the exit multiples, the exit valuations tend to be very similar because we're exiting in the same places. We're exiting with M&A to the same, biotech, pharma company in the US. And interestingly, the IPO market and the ASX, when you get a medtech company to commercial success, we actually see valuation premiums, Australia less the US. And you can look at Promedicus, you can look at, WiseTech, at CSL and company, they all trade a massive premiums to what they would or what similar companies in the US trade at.
And so one interesting question in the markets right now, why that is that sustainable? Or is it just a moment in time where there's a premium for a certain type of companies? Is there something structural where there's like super funds and there's only have to invest in ASX 50? And once they're in that top 50 companies and there's only a handful of companies in that sector?
Yeah, I think it is structural. I mean, Promedicus has been at 50 one-time sales for the last 10 years. It's been expensive for a very, very long time. Same with Copley. I think the last time Copley was cheap when they had a product recall in 2011. But subsequent to that, it's been 70, 80 times PE for a very, very long time. And the E in Copley over the last 5, 6 years hasn't grown that strongly, right? Earnings. And it's maintained that valuation. Biotech companies in the US trade generally 15 to 20 times earnings. CSL has consistently been 30 to 40 times. And where do you go in Australia if you want high quality growth with a moat and the hurdles to entry? There aren't that many cases in Australia. If you go to the US, you've got companies like Amazon and Google that are growing very, very fast. That are trillions of dollars in size. But you go all the way down when you get to, there are many, many companies that are $5-10 billion size, biotech, medtech companies that have strong sales growth. So we don't have any of that in Australia. Really, in Australia, on the meat cap side, we've got Telix and we've got Neuro. They're profitable medtech, biotech companies. I don't think there's no one else outside Cochlear, Ramsey, Cochlear, Resident, and CSL, right? So there's just limited choice. And at least throughout my career, which is, at least had a couple of cycles now, particularly with this biotech crash in 2022, we haven't seen, I think it's structural. I think it's always going to be like this until we have enough and we've got a variety of choice in the ASX.
There does seem to be a few challenges coming out the ranks, but we'll just have to see. What's your take on on that crash? Because that was pretty gnarly. I mean, we saw some wild things, and it was frustrating. I remember we had a stock going from $15 to $1 back to 24. Like these were companies that actually had amazing data that were working, and then ultimately had products approved and are now selling. So it's not like the market got it wrong and then right, and then it really was just a complete liquidation down. Yeah, it's something I need to say.
I mean, it was absolutely crazy, right? Because the biotech, the healthcare valuation started to derate almost in stealth. Like I started in 2021 on the NASDAQ.
I remember when that's when, like, under the surface of the market, things just started dropping like the stuff.
Yeah, and then I think it became more broader with tech and other sectors as well in 2020. And then to your point, it kept falling and then it stayed down. And it stayed down and it just never really got back up. In the US, we've seen a recovery. In Australia, on the private side, we haven't. And it's one of those things where people look back retrospectively and kind of make up answers to fit the evidence that is out there. But I don't have a really good answer to why it happened and why it was so deep as well. Like the valuations fell and it stayed down it fell more and was lower for longer than any other healthcare crash. I guess it was longer and deeper than the genomics bubble in 01 in the modern capital markets. And maybe a lot of companies failed, a lot of good tech failed to get commercialized. In Australia right now, there is very limited capital. There's less capital today than there were pre-COVID and during COVID for biotech companies from specialist investors. What I found in me raising my fund and speaking to institutional investors is that a lot of them are still waiting for exits. So the funds they invested in 2018, 2019, the IPO window hasn't really opened at all in Australia and the US. And so they haven't been able to exit funds that they invested in 5, 10 years ago. Therefore, they can't allocate new money to new funds, and therefore new companies don't get supported. And so it's a bit of a kind of a vicious cycle. And I think the last thing that we need to see recover before we see a broad-based recovery in the market is the IPO window opening again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's gonna be hard to do because there is that backlog, and it's not like there's huge amounts of new funds being raised. Remember how there was like this craze for pre-IPO funds, and there was really easy to raise money to pre-IPO funds, and there was like the pipeline. It was like you got in, you did the pre-IPO. Some people got in before the pre-IPO. Then they listed. Everyone got their 30% discount. Everyone got their 50 to 100% uplift. Recycle and go again.
Yep.
And everybody raised funds. And then when you think about it, because there's been no IPOs, everything that anybody owned at that stage is frozen.
Exactly.
Any new investment anyone's made, all that capital is now frozen. I'm not sure what it take. I mean, you're a board member of Kurrbeam, so maybe we could talk about that because that was one of the very few companies that was able to list. It's had a pretty turbulent trading history since. But it'd be great to hear you kind of explain what the company does, why it's interesting, and then we can talk about where it's at and where it's going.
Yeah, so I'm starting with what the company does. So the company's a medical device company. It's got approvals in most major markets, and it sells a weight-bearing CT device. So it's a small point-of-care CT device, really targeted towards orthopedic surgeons and orthopedic practices, where it can do feet and knees, hips, hands, elbows. And so for an orthopedic surgery practice, they pretty much do everything that they need except shoulders, spine. And so I think it's a very kind of wholesome, well-rounded product for orthopedic surgeons. The cost differential between one of these weight-bearing CT devices that Kurrbeam sells called the high-rise and a traditional CT machine is about 4x. And Kurrbeam sells a product for about 1,000. A CT machine is usually about 2 million. But where the real kind of differences lie is the cost of upkeep. So an old CT device, the warranty and servicing expenses about $200,000 a year, whereas with ours is about $35,000 a year. And in every single state, you need a certified CT technician to operate a CT device, whose salary is now in this market range, $100,000, $150,000. In most states, that's not necessary for Kurrbeam's high-rise. That's our market that we've gone for. And so to your point about listing, I mean, how did we list? And the reason we got listed that business is the register we built. So Carspeak was the first institutional investor in that company. I took a board seat then 3-4 years ago now. And we kind of assisted the company to do a vertical merger with its technology partner in the US, go from pre-approvals to post-approvals, pre-revenue to post-revenue. And then at the subsequent funding round, you guys invested and we bought, I think, probably half a dozen odd institutional investors onto the register, large funds, supportive investors. And when it came time to do the next funding round, was a big learning experience to me about the importance of the capital structure and how you structure the investments. And because we had these convertible notes sitting on the cap table, the cap structure was starting to get pretty complex. And there was a need to clean it up. And the only way we could clean that up was with an IPO. And so we were kind of forced to do an IPO in that market. And it was very challenging, right? It was very challenging to find new money. And we saw what happened where in a market where it's really dead, really, where there's not very little retail and high net worth participation, that the stock price can fall materially on $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 worth of trades, which can be very punishing for the company. And Curvebeam put out the first few quarters of sales, we're having purchase orders double what they did in the previous year on year, right? And that didn't seem to be enough for the market, but the trading was very low, right? Something like 50 to 60% of the companies owned by institutional investors, 30% are owned by the founders, board management. And so there's a very little amount of shares in traders' hands, really. But that was enough to kind of drive the share price down quite materially. Generally, that doesn't matter. Like, I'm of the view that the share price only matters on 2 days, when you buy and when you sell, because of maybe a venture capital investor. But for a company, there's also another day that's important, is when you raise capital. And so Kurrbeam did a funding round recently at 18 cents. But that, interesting enough, when I put my fund manager hat on, creates a lot of this market is the best market I've seen to invest into biotech and medtech companies. The valuations are significantly lower than they were a few years ago. There's less money out there competing, to your point, right? Every fund was invested in biotech in 2021, right? Whether they knew what they were doing or they didn't know what they did. High-net worths were in the market as well, but we've seen all of them leave the market, right? It's only us specialist investors left in this market. And that's created incredible opportunities where we can really negotiate deal structure, valuations with the company, but also influence, right? Board seats and really tranching our investment. So we're very excited, right? You know, that age-old saying of buy low, sell high. To the point, it was very easy to raise a fund in 2021, very hard to raise a fund in 2024. It shouldn't be it's paradoxical. It should be the other way around, right? Because this is the time when the market is low, and this is when you should really be increasing the allocation to these risk assets, not in 2021, because these are long duration assets, right? So it will take many, many years for these clinical trials to play out, medical device companies to build commercial traction. And often the exit is independent of the market, right? It doesn't matter what market valuations are. If your drug works, you tend to get acquired by a big pharma. If your medical device commercially successful, you can exit to a big net tech company. And sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but you can see that with Neuron, right? Neuron went up 20-something X on the backdrop of that collapse in valuations, because the risk in these companies is idiosyncratic. It's not market risk. So Neuron, they had a positive phase 3, they got FDA approval, and then they started making revenue. And on that backdrop, what the market did was almost irrelevant to Neuron. It went up from $1 a share to $20, $25 a share. It's kind of back down now. So that's why we're super excited to be raising this fund and to be investing.
I mean, look at all these recent raises. They're all done with like a significant risk of failure pricing. You know, even Kurrbeam, you know, that pricing suggests that they won't succeed. And a significant percentage apply to the probability that they won't succeed. Whereas, you know, 2021 was the opposite. People are pricing in, what if it has 10 years of success from now?
Exactly. Yeah. There's no margin for error. I mean, yeah, going back to Curvebeam, right? So Curvebeam has a partner already, the US company called Stryker, the world's largest orthopedics company. Stryker's foot and ankle division is out there selling Curvebeam's product. And so before we invested in Curvebeam, I flew over to the US and I sat in the car with the Stryker reps in 4 cities. So I was in Portland, Oregon, Des Moines, Iowa, Memphis, Tennessee, and Omaha, Nebraska. And I sat in the car with these Stryker reps because I wanted to get firsthand intel from these doctors and these not just the surgeons. I wanted to hear from the CEOs of the practices, the CFOs, the imaging technicians, to see how the device was treated and what could be the potential bottlenecks. What is the feedback? Is this device going to be successful? And as far as these people knew, I was just another Stryker rep, right? So they didn't have any reason to not provide me with the feedback that they would be providing Stryker. And you only when we Sigma study and we get feedback, we often get the feedback from someone higher up. They get it from someone, you know, that they report into, who gets it from their sales reps, who gets it from the doctors, so 4 or 5 levels back from the actual advice or the actual intelligence. And so I went out on the ground and I saw that. And I walked away more confident than I was when I walked in, to really seeing the buy-in from the surgeons, right? Like the discussion on clinical utility, right? Does this add benefit to my patient? That's taken as granted. That these surgeons are fully bought in on the value. And so now what's left for Kurrbeam to do is show the commercial and rationale for the company. How does this device fit into your workflow? How does it improve efficiency within your center? And what does the kind of financial metrics look like? What is break even? How many images do you need to do? What are the payback period looks like if you do 2 images a day, 3, 5, 10? With that, so the company's now doing validation to move up from the foot and ankle to really move up to knee and hip, which I think is the next step.
That Stryker relationship, I remember when Kurrbeam's reps kind of stopped selling it themselves effectively and handed the sales responsibility to Stryker. It was a bit slow. I mean, we were trying to Stryker people and they were saying they've got this huge demand, they can do 1 to 2 each. And, you know, there's, 50 plus territories, 1 to 2 sales a territory. It was very much matching up what we were hearing from the company, but then they didn't really cut. So what did you learn about that?
Yeah. And so from this trip to the US, what I noticed is if you look at a generic center in any town in the USA, if there is 10, let's say if there's 20 surgeons in the center, they might have 1 or 2 foot and ankle surgeons. And so the foot and ankle surgeons are the real champions of this product, right? But when the foot and ankle surgeon goes in and pitches it to their colleagues, often their colleagues sit there going, well, what's in it? What's the benefit? What's the can I use it for knee? Can I use it for hip? And I think the company could do a better job on communicating the clinical utility to knee surgeons, and to hand surgeons. Actually, interestingly, I spoke to a center in Portland, in Oregon, where the foot and ankle surgeon told me that he actually struggles to get same-day bookings because hand surgeons use that device so much. And I think what the company needs to do is go out and show that to prospective clients, right? Because if you've got two foot and ankle surgeons, the CEOs, the CFOs, and the other surgeons sitting there thinking, is it worth the investment?
How much, what are they selling for?
$500,000. Yeah. And so the break-even analytics is about 2 scans a day is break-even, if you assume that they finance the device. Generally, the payback period we see for the ones that are sold are between 12 to 18 months, right? So the ROI is already there. And we've got lots of devices sold that, that this can be sold to the customer. But I think maybe the company didn't fully appreciate how much of a hurdle that was. And so the easiest way to solve that is by moving up the leg. And so by showing that it will work with what knee surgeons are doing, with what hip surgeons are doing, that in a total knee replacement, using a robotic surgical system, if we're validated on that, that's the quickest way to solve that problem.
Just to spot the opportunity. So how are people getting these scans down, and how's Kurrbeam different?
Yeah, so at the moment, if a CT scan is required, the doctor has to refer. Generally, most centers do not, like the vast majority of centers, don't have a CT device because of the cost and the upkeep. And also with the big CT device, you've got to lead line the rooms, and it's quite a significant CapEx contribution as well. So most centers don't have a CT device.
Still need to do that. You still need to do the lead lining with Kurrbeam, right?
Not always.
Not always.
Yeah, so the medical physicist goes in and does a scanner analysis and determines if you need to lead line the room. And nearly every single center has an X-ray machine, and that X-ray machine's room is lead lined to the X-ray standard. And most of the time, that is enough for the high-rise. It will not be enough for a big CT device, but it's enough usually for the high-rise. And so the workflow, the way it works is the patient comes in, sees their surgeon says, you need a CT scan. He writes a referral. The patient then has to make an appointment at the CT center, get that CT image done, and then come back for the next visit. So for the patient, it's 3 visits. And so the way that the workflow changed that I've seen, the good surgeons that use the high-rise device, is that when a patient schedules to see the surgeon, the nurse or the physician's assistant sees that the patient's here for X, Y, and Z condition, and will book that patient in for the high-rise before they see the surgeon. And so the patient presents before the appointment, gets an image, sees the surgeon. Surgeon's got all the information there, and surgeon goes, this is what we need to do. So 1 patient, 1 visit with the surgeon. Now, for the surgeon, what that means is they'll never see the patient once, not twice. They can see the patient once and do surgery. And so that keeps more appointments available for new patients. The lifeblood of a surgeon is new patients, right? Because they don't follow this patient for many, many years and treat the patient like a physician. They see the patient, do surgery, and the patient goes back to their primary care physician. And that can dramatically improve the overall revenue picture for the surgeon. Now, the other kind of added benefit is that by doing the image in their clinic, they can bill the insurer for the CT scan. And it depends on how much that is, depending on states and different types of payers, but it can range from, I think Medicare is about $180, $200 per scan, all the way up to, $400 plus for a private insurer. So it can be a very profitable device. So that's kind of the benefits to the patient, benefits to the surgeon, and also the clinical benefit I should know. So the joints underweight are different to the joints when you're lying down. And so if you've got something wrong with your ankle, the joint looks different when you're standing on it versus when you're lying down. And so weight-bearing CT is a more better physiological representation of that joint, and allows for improved surgical planning, improved surgery, and better outcomes. And there's lots of publications now that show that, particularly from an ankle. And now we're seeing publications also come out in knee as well.
What's the level of that difference? How much of a difference does it really make?
Well, in some patients, their joint can look normal when they're lying down. And so I think the company's got some pictures in their presentation where a patient comes in and complains about their foot pain, They do a CT scan lying down and the joint looks completely normal. And when they stand up, you can then begin to see the impingement, bone and bone contact, or whatever it might be that causes that's caused the pain. The other thing as well is called functional alignment. And this is the way orthopedic surgery is really moved to, right? Because what they found is that if you got two legs like that, if you do a total knee replacement or total ankle replacement on this side and you get the angles wrong, that can cause issues on the contralateral, on the other knee, on the hip or the knee. And so what we can do with our device, the HiRise, is you can measure complete functional alignment, underweight bearing. And so you know exactly what angle to put that prosthesis in, right? If you're doing a knee, you know exactly what angle to put that in. So you don't create a problem on the other joints. And our device is the only device in the world that can do that. And Kurrbeam is actually in the process of developing AI algorithms to automate all of this. Particularly the first cap of the rank will be in foot and ankle, where we've got a project to develop what's called autometrics to measure all the angles, pretty much do all this pre-surgical planning for the surgeon. And the clinical study was published in 500 patients that showed that our AI was as good as a surgeon doing it themselves, but 97% faster, right? Because obviously it's a software.
What was the plan for those software modules? There's no revenue from that at the moment, is it?
No, it depends really on if there's reimbursement or there's no reimbursement. The biggest one of those coming down the pipeline is bone mineral density for osteoporosis. Reimbursement is established. It is the kind of gold standard way people diagnose and manage osteoporosis and bone fragility. We are developing a product that will be able to do that on the higher end. So one scan, you can do a CT image and you can do the BMD. The way that would work is we will charge the surgeon a % of the reimbursement. So, if that's for argument's sake, you get $150 from that, we will charge percent of, X%, which will be substantial, 50 or more %, and the surgeon will keep the rest. And for the surgeon and the clinic, they're not doing anything different. The same scan they would have done to image the patient, but now I'll get two payments, one for the scan, one for the BMD, and they'll be able to assess that patient's bone quality. So that will determine what type of prosthesis they use, if it's cemented or not cemented. It will determine how they operate on that patient. But also, if that patient comes back with really bad bone quality, that surgeon can then go back to the insurer and say, this is a complex case. So I want to apply a modifier. So instead of getting paid 1 time, I'm going to apply a modifier that pays me 1.4, 1.5 times. So it's an ability for the surgeon to make more money on that surgery because it is more complex. Like if the patient has really brittle bone, you have to operate on a very different way than the patient doesn't. And so that's the ones we reimbursement. So using BMD as an example. If you're using autometrics as an example, where that automated surgical planning, there is no reimbursement. And so that, I think, is more of a traditional SaaS based kind of payment model. So we will target a payment, annual payment per seat of, X many $1,000 a year. And, if that adds value to that surgeon and improves their throughput because they no longer have to spend all that time doing pre-surgical planning, we think that argument can be made. So on BMD, that could be quite a lucrative revenue stream that comes from the high-rise placements. And then you just add on the other AI modules that we're building.
Got it. So what's the timeline on that? When do you think you'll get first revenues?
Yeah, so BMD, FDA approval, the guidance from the company is middle of next year. And once that's out, we'll be able to turn that on as a software upgrade. So that's why we're very focused on getting devices out to market.
So really important installed base. What's installed base now, would you say?
It's a good question. So we're around 50, but I have to get back to you on the exact number. So 50 high-rises globally, I'd say 35 in the US. In totality of all the devices, first generation, second generation devices, it's above 150 now globally. Devices in South America, and Europe, and Australia, and in Asia. I think the only continent where we don't have a device sold is Antarctica.
Right.
But I don't think those penguins need too much weight bearing into.
I mean, they're big devices though. How do you get them to South America? Is that a challenge?
No, I mean, we manufacture in Philadelphia, and we do the final assembly and manufacturing facility in Philadelphia, and we ship it down. Most of the sales outside of the US are inbound. So surgeons reaching out to us because weight bearing CT is becoming standard of care, particularly in foot and ankle. And so a lot of these universities, larger surgical centers reach out because they believe that it becomes standard of that for their patients. So I think it all hinges on the time to get this surgical robotic system validation done, and that materially increases the appeal of the high-rise to most orthopedic surgical centers. They're called ASCs, ambulatory care centers. And that process is underway.
And Kurrbeam isn't the only company you're a director of. So why don't we change tack and talk about Syntara, which we also have a small shareholding as a disclosure. So do you want to describe Syntara, what their main program does, like what the disease is, how they're hoping to treat it, what data they have so far?
Yeah, so Syntara is a biotech. It develops drugs to treat rare hematological malignancies, so blood cancers. So to give you a bit of history of that company, it used to be called Fund Access. I took a directorship in June last year. It was a cost peak portfolio company. And I really, my kind of number one, number two, three focus was to get rid of that mental business. And because we saw all the value in that business in the drugs in developing, because they're kind of fantastic first-class drugs. And so my new fund was took a stake in Syntara at the most aggressive capital raised. So it's an interesting company in the sense that it is running 5 phase 2 trials, 4 of them with non-dilutive capital, with a market cap of around 30-40 million. It's quite extraordinary for a company to be doing as much as they're doing for the size of company they are. And so their lead candidate is in a condition called myelofibrosis. So this is a rare cancer of the bone marrow, where effectively, very slowly, your bone marrow turns into scar tissue, which strangles your bone marrow. You stop your ability to produce red blood cells, platelets, seizures, and you die. There is no disease-modifying therapies on the market at the moment. The only, all the approved products on the market at the moment are symptomatic treatments. They make you feel better, but they don't really make you any longer. And so the way that Syntara's drug works, it's an antifibrotic. So it stops the cross-linking of collagen, which means that the collagen is available for the body to clear. And they did a phase 1C trial in late-stage myelofibrosis patients. And what they were able to show in that really sick group of patients was that treating it with Syntara's drug monotherapy with nothing else and showed an improvement in blood counts, improvement in fibrosis levels. I think a couple of the patients were transfusion independent, and they needed transfusions of red blood cells and platelets, to someone actually not having a transfusion after they were on drug for a set amount of time. And now the new trial is in an earlier stage group of patients in combination with the standard KMG drug called jacafine. So that data is coming out in December this year. And so generally taking a step back, when we look at drugs and how we evaluate drugs to invest in, there's a couple of questions that we look at. So, the first one is, when you take the drug, is it bioavailable? Tick, we know that on Syntara. So that means it's absorbed. So if it's an injection, is it absorbed? If you take it orally, is it absorbed? Does that go from absorption? Does that drug travel to the site that you need it to go to? And when it gets there, does it bind to and have the desired effect on the blood enzyme molecule? And we know that it does that with Syntara. They had assays and they published that when you take this drug orally, it's absorbed, the drug travels to the site, it binds to and inhibits the LOX molecule and inhibits more than 90% at 24-hour mark. Now, usually the next question to answer is, does binding to that molecule, binding to LOX, does that cause a disease modification in fibrosis? Now, usually you don't get to answer that question until you've done a large trial in phase 2B or phase 3. But interestingly with Syntara, we actually know the answer to that question because they reformulated that pan-LOX inhibitor that they take for myelofibrosis in a topical cream that they put on patients with established scars. So the median age of that scar was 13 years. And they were able to show that with these old scars, that treating it for 3 months resulted in a 32% reduction in excess collagen. So now we actually know the answer to the question, does inhibiting LOX cause a change to scarring? We know that in old scars, in patients, 13-year-old scars in actually by an elderly group of patients. So the only question left to answer with Syntara and this drug in this indication is, does preventing or reversing fibrosis, is that disease modifying myelofibrosis? Now, I'd be astounded if the answer to that question was no, right? Because the pathogenesis of that disease is the fibrotic change in the bone marrow. We we're excitedly waiting the data that's coming out in December at the American Society of Hematology conference. But we have a lot more data to diligence with Syntara than you do with most companies at this stage.
Just because they've got those multiple programs of trying to burn scarring.
Yeah, so they're trying to establish burns. They've got a trial running at the moment with Fiona Wood in burns to prevent scarring. And they've got this trial in myelofibrosis that we discussed. They've got another program that's being funded by the German government, interestingly, for another rare blood cancer called myelodysplastic syndrome. And that trial is about to start recruiting. So there's two trials there. One in high-risk myelodysplastic syndrome patients and another trial in low to medium-risk myelodysplastic syndrome patients.
The reason the German government funded it is a big problem in that country, in that region?
No, so there was a researcher at this university that wanted a drug from Syntara. The company provided a drug, and he did some really interesting preclinical research that provided some very strong data. And then he used that data to apply for grants to Germany. And he won. There is very limited benefit to the German government here. This is an Australian company, Australian drug. We maintain all rights to the IP, and yet the data was strong enough to nearly full funding of that clinical trial. Those two things.
And one thing I loved about this company is they do all their own science. Like I've noticed that the biotech and healthcare stocks that we've invested in, they've all done their own science. And the ones that haven't worked have like repurposed a drug or done some reformulation or new delivery system. They're the ones that seem to be a bit more dangerous and a bit more, what's the word?
Yeah,
People taking their chances.
Yeah, I think the reason for that is the medical chemistry and the preclinical work is important even when a drug goes into the clinic, right? We need to make sure we understand how this drug moves around the body, how it interacts with its target, what the off-site toxicity could be, how it interacts with other drugs, what's the potential for drug-drug interactions. And this team at Syntara can do all of this work in-house. And Syntara's kind of value proposition is that they're the world leaders in this type of chemistry called lysine oxidase chemistry and monoamine oxidase chemistry. And they know more about it than anyone else in the world. But also to your point, to the best of my knowledge, Syntara is the only company on the ASX, apart from CSL, that can develop its own drugs. Everyone else is like Neuron had licensed drugs from University of Auckland. No one else really makes their own drugs. Can go from, there's an interesting target, I want a target, and has a team that can create drugs to then go ahead and push them into clinical trials. It's a very productive drug discovery engine that Syntara has, where that value hasn't really been unlocked yet because the company's unable to fund it internally, right? But I think once you get one or two successful drugs and they're able to fund it, I think that can be that's when you start to unlock the value for the drug discovery engine.
Yeah. So what can we expect in this trial, and what do you think the value uplift would be given the size of the market and prior transactions? Because there's been a few key transactions in this space, right? And they weren't in particularly good drugs either.
No. So yeah, it's very interesting. So the acquisitions for the companies in this disease, they tend to happen at the phase 3 stage or later. So the largest one was a $2.7 billion acquisition. And then there were two other acquisitions at the 1.6, 1.8 billion, like 2.7 billion and 1.7, 1.8 billion. Those drugs, for the large part, were Me Too drugs. They work on the same pathway that the existing standard of care works on, or they're just another symptomatic treatment that doesn't have a disease-modifying capability. And then what's really exciting about what Syntara has is with myelofibrosis patients, if we take a step back, when you first get diagnosed with myelofibrosis, you go into watchful waiting. So if you can't get a bone marrow transplant, you go into watchful waiting. What that effectively means is you go home and you wait for your disease to get so bad that you have really bad symptoms. Then you go back to your doctor and they give you a symptomatic treatment, right? Because the treatment, Jakafi, actually reduces your red blood cells, reduces your platelets. So it's myelosuppressive. It's paradoxical, right? But it reduces the size of your spleen and makes you feel a little bit better. It doesn't actually increase the lifespan. So there's a whole group of patients at the moment with myelofibrosis that don't get a treatment. They just have to wait until their disease gets worse, which is heartbreaking, right? We think about that group of patients. And given that this drug that we have with Syntara The toxicity profile, the tolerability profile is very, very good. It can be used in combination with these more toxic JAK inhibitors, but it could potentially be used in these earlier patient populations that could take it for years. But obviously, we'd have to do a clinical trial and show that it can, potentially slow down disease progression. But it's not just myelofibrosis, right? Because it's an antifibrotic. There are many, many diseases where this drug could work. Solid tumors is a potential here. Cancer within you will evolve away to stop treatments getting in and stop the immune system getting in. The way it does that is it creates a fibrotic shield around it. So pancreatic cancer is probably the one that does it the best. And so this fibrotic stroma that's created stops drugs getting in and stops your immune system getting in. And so theoretically, a drug like this could work alongside other anti-cancer drugs in solid tumors. And interestingly enough, the way that cancer spreads, and now we know this definitively with breast cancer, the first thing that happens when cancer spreads is it creates a little nook or a little niche for itself. And it does that by first creating a fibrotic corner in the liver and the lung. And then inside that fibrotic protective sheet is where the cancer, the metastasis grows. And so if you think about it like terraforming, if you've got a breast cancer, for that breast tissue to survive in the lung or survive in the liver or survive in the brain, the first thing that happens is the fibrotic sheet kind of terrafolds and creates a protective niche for that metastasis to grow. And so this is, not something that the company is looking at in the short term, but I'm speaking as an investor. Theoretically, there's an angle here where the company could, this drug could be looked at to call the adjuvant setting off with the tumors being cut out to prevent metastasis. So the use case here is in cancer is really, really broad. Outside of cancer, there's a lot of rare diseases where fibrosis is very involved in the disease progression. Kidney diseases, there's a really bad condition called systemic sclerosis, where 70-80% of the body, the skin turns into scar tissue. You can't move your hands, you can't move your neck. But at the same time that happens, your lungs, your kidneys, your gut, it's a horrible disease with very little treatment options for these patients. And that it could be an atrophic condition as well. And then, the list goes on, right? Because there aren't that many pure antifibrotics in discovery at the moment, in development at the moment, but none with a tolerability profile like Syntara's that can be potentially used by patients for many, many years without potentially theoretically causing other side effects.
Has there been any preclinical work in solid tumors?
Yes.
What's that shown?
That shows the positive results you would expect, but the problem with solid tumor models in cancer, they're called xenograft models. And so you take a cancer, you attach it onto the patient. Its predictiveness into human trials is mixed at best, but particularly in this mechanism of action, I think you need the cancer to develop naturally, and you need, an extended period of training. When you do a xenograft model in mice, the mice need to die pretty quickly, right? Because you've taken this tumor and you whacked it on the side of the mouse. But what the animal models have shown is that this particular product, 5505, used in combination with other cancer, because this drug itself is not going to be cytotoxic. It's not going to kill the cancer itself, but it's going to allow other cancer drugs to get in there and kill the tumor. And they've shown an improvement in survival in these xenograft models.
Mm. So this is big moment for them later this year.
I think so. I think the data comes out at ASH, and then the next thing the company needs to do is discuss potentially with the regulator about what the next steps are. Because myelofibrosis is a rare disease with an incredible high unmet need. And so depending on what the regulatory feedback is, there could be a quick path to market with one more trial.
Well, the beauty is, do you think the regulators allow them to do standard of care versus standard of care with the drug?
So that's what the other trials in this case, that's what it's been. So
yeah.
So the current trial.
That's probably the best chance of success.
Exactly. Yeah. When you look at the other drugs that were approved in the space, Me Too drugs, they don't materially change standard of care. They'd be standard of care plus drug versus standard of care. And the endpoints you're looking at, it's a symptom score called the TSS, Total Symptom Score, and one other endpoint. And that could be spleen volume, that could be blood counts, some other clinical endpoint. And so most other companies have used green volume. So a 35% reduction is green volume as the other input.
There's another company I'm looking at, but I'm not currently an investor, and that is Skint Neuron, which I only know a little bit about, but the elevated pitch seems to be they're curing dogs with Alzheimer's, and dogs are apparently a pretty good model of Alzheimer's. Are you able to give a bit of a background on that company? And this is a private company that's raising money at the moment.
We invested in that company in this round alongside two other venture capital funds in Australia. I think it's very exciting. And so the way that this drug works effectively is they take stem cells from the patient's skin and they take a particular stem cell from a very, very particular part of the body. They expand those cells and they inject that cell into a part of the brain that is responsible for memory called the hippocampus. And what they've been able to show in dogs is when you do that, the cells differentiate into neurons, memory neurons. They migrate to the part of the hippocampus they need to migrate to. And very importantly, they make the synaptic connections they need to make, right? So that's the big thing in the brain and the spine, any neural tissue is it's all well and good to put cells there or to put neurons there. But they got to make the right connection. They got to connect with the surrounding tissue to be able to communicate. And they've been able to show that when you inject the precursors, these stem cells, in the presence of the neurotropic factors and the other factors that exist in the hippocampus, the cells differentiate, migrate, and create the synaptic connections. And so this model was really developed by the founder of the company. Dogs develop Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer-like disease naturally. So the model, the big reason why animal models are not predictive of human disease. Let's say in lung disease, we get a mouse, and what the researchers do is they just destroy the lung tissue and use that as a surrogate for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis or COPD or asthma or whatever. But that mouse, it didn't develop that disease. So they use a drug usually called bleomycin. That just goes in and just strips their lung or strips their gut. And it's not representative of human disease. Because if you've got COPD or emphysema, you can get that because you inhale a bunch of bleomycin. You got that for a variety of reasons that we really don't understand. But in Alzheimer's disease, dogs develop that naturally. And the part of the brain that we're interested in, the hippocampus, it's actually not that different from dogs to humans. So that part of the brain is called the archicortex, the hippocampus, the amygdala, so the limbic system. That part of the brain is preserved in mammals going back, to very, very small mammals. And when you think about that, right, like memory, emotion, fight or flight, that is very primitive things, right? What makes it human? Human is the neocortex, the big thing that sits over the archicortex that gives us the high level functions, the reasoning, the planning, speech. Because the hippocampus from dogs are very similar to the hippocampus from humans. And the results that they got from dogs was quite outstanding, right? I can't remember the exact figures off the top of my head, but I think the majority of those dogs, their disease fell below the threshold. So fell below what would be enough to classify that they had Alzheimer's disease. And I believe 2 out of the 6 dogs have full recovery.
And that's pretty phenomenal. There's very few, I'm trying to think if there's precedent from that. And even drugs are kind of supposed to slow down. They really talk about reversing.
Yeah, no, I've never seen these kind of results before in any, be it animals or humans. And so when you look at the drugs that are approved and the drugs that are in development, that target beta amyloid and tau and all that kind of stuff, the best they do is slow down disease. But when I say they slow down disease, let's say, one of our parents our grandparents had Alzheimer's disease. If we gave that drug to our grandparents, we wouldn't notice a change in it. Like, in order to see a change in these drugs, you need 10,000 patients in the control arm and 10,000 patients in the active arm. And then you can see a slight separation of the curve, right? It's very, very slight. But with Skint Neuron's drug, you'll be able to, if this works, you'll be able to see it in the first few patients. So that's why we're very excited. We don't think that this company will exist beyond a phase 1B trial. Because if you can have the same results in 10 patients, the chance that it happens the likelihood that this is by chance, right? Alzheimer's patients do not recover memory, recover the ability to remember spontaneously. It does not happen. And so we can see that in the first few patients. This is Nobel science winning. It would be astronomical. Like, it'd be fantastic. And we are very excited to support this company in that research. Pure
Yeah,
Australian IP.
So Australian made. Why don't you talk a bit about the background of the CEO, because he's quite impressive as well.
Yeah, so the medical founder, he's an absolute expert in this type of medicine that looks at taking stem cells and transforming them into
These are Yamanan factors, right? Which are now very well publicized on the Twitter sphere.
yeah,
The pod.
yeah. On is that on the longevity side? Is that where that?
Yeah, on the All In podcast and things like that. So it was very interesting to see them pop up in a company in Australia.
Yeah, and so the CEO, his background, his name is Dr. Brendan Booth. He's a neurologist by training, and then he went over to the US and worked with companies like Biogen, which is a very large company that also brought in the top 3 for Alzheimer's research. And most recently, he worked for a company called Blue Rock. That when he started was really a startup, and now they've come to a decent size and raised a lot of money. He is an absolute KOL in Alzheimer's development, from big pharma to startup.
Biogen was running those trials, right? He was working on those pivotal trials that everybody in the biotech world is like studying extremely closely.
Yeah, so the aducanumab stuff, he saw that from the inside. And, he's forgotten more about Alzheimer's drug development than most people will ever learn. And yeah, we're very excited to have him come on board as the CEO.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. What quick fire? You know that Clarity's been one of our biggest positions, certainly after it's gone up 7 times. Do you have any thoughts on that in the radiopharma space?
The radiopharmaceutical space is very exciting. There's been a lot of acquisitions in the space, a lot of interest from big pharma. From every big pharma, has probably now made at least one acquisition in the radiopharmaceutical space. And TUX has really shown how it's done, right? Saw a problem, saw a medical need, and found a product that could satisfy that medical need. Where Clarity sits, their products are a lot more early stage. The lead product is a PSMA imaging agent. When that product comes to market, that PSMA imaging side will be pretty crowded. There'll be a few products there. And so I think Clarity will need to really show clinical superiority or some kind of differentiation. And early data from that trial seems to suggest that they potentially might. Much longer half-life, being able to show the brightness when the tumor absorbs their product. You can see it a lot clearer in the image than you can with some other products, given the half-life. But I think they'll need to show that in a conclusive way.
It's the therapeutics that's got everybody really excited, right?
Yes, yeah, and I think they need to continue to show good results from the therapeutic side of that business. Do I think it gets acquired where it is today? I think because Clarity doing something so different. What I normally see with big pharma is, I'll use the radiopharm example, right? The drugs that worked and were approved were lutetium, right? So big pharma now like, all right, lutetium is somewhat de-risked. Clarity is something very, very different to lutetium. And so that is good and bad. And same with Syntara, right? Syntara has something that's very unique to them. The good thing is that it's very unique and it can have all these kind of benefits. But the bad thing is you have to bring big pharma on the journey with you. And so often you have to do a lot of the de-risking yourself before an acquisition comes about. And so it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but if it works, it is much more lucrative to be in that position than to have a drum that other people, similar drug to other people have. But you need to go ahead and do a lot of that development themselves. And Clarity can do that, right? They recently did a very large capital raise. They're very well funded to continue their development.
Have you been following the Antares story?
Not really. I've never really followed Antera's story because on the grounds of valuation. I mean, it was a $400 million story for a while, even when they'd only kind of had devices in 2 or 3 patients. But that's not been one that I've really followed.
Yeah. I found it interesting because it was one of those ones where the management seemed to think it was very undervalued. And there were a couple of institutions that were supporting it the whole way. So it's good and bad. When you've got a couple of institutions that are willing to back every raise, it's good because the raises get done and everyone feels comfortable that the company's not going to run out of money. But it's bad because you don't really get such a good market signal. And then you get in situations where there's no liquidity as well. So it's not a case of bad news came out and the stock went down. These things can gap down on basically no selling. They just reprice. And they kind of believe that they're on a massive valuation discount in Australia relative to where they would be in the United States. And, they have a product. It's like a valve that works, kind of a better mousetrap, by many accounts, better than existing alternatives. the companies like Medtronic that sell these valves, worth tens of billions of dollars. So you could really see the opportunity. You've got a better product. There's a reason it should be better. It's performing better in trials. The first uplift was only 6 patients, but I think now they're up to like 65, 70 patients. Last week, one of the surgeons that uses the devices was touring with the company. But I think it was one of they kind of messed up the financing strategy, whereas usually financing strategy shouldn't matter that much. But if you get in your head that if only we're listed in the United States would be worth 10 times as much, that's a really bad way to be thinking about these things, because then when your company's 300, 400, they're not doing the raise. It's like you've got the market cap, raise the 50 to 100. Australian phase 1 are known around the world for being the cheapest because it's very easy to get regulatory approval and the FDA accepts Australian phase 1. But phase 2, 3, you're going to have to do it to a US standard, which is much, much, much bigger. You're going to have to get all the approvals before, so that you don't have that same cost advantage. A lot of these companies have to raise, hundreds of millions of dollars, whereas in their prior rounds, maybe 10, 15, 20 was enough. So they've announced they're going to IPO. Instead of doing one of these flash fundraisings where the brokers go out, call everybody and say, the stock's in a trading hold, we're raising tomorrow, you're out, which is how these things in practice get funded. Instead, everybody knows there's this huge fundraising coming when they relist. It's going to be, could be up to 100 million US. So seems very little reason for a shareholder to buy, because you can easily get stock in such a big raise. But it's also pushed the share price so down that all of a sudden it's a really dangerous situation. So I think now I'm being more clearer in my meetings when I see companies like that. It's just do the raise. Don't believe that the Americans are going to give you a premium. I think we see you do the rounds in the US. Everybody's excited. They meet all these huge funds and they're like, great, the reception is amazing. I can't wait to relist in the US and get massively up. What they don't realize is a lot of those funds short. They're often back to competing products. They've spent like 3 years convincing themselves that the competitor is better for 10 different reasons. They're excited to meet the company, but not because they want to buy it. They could be short. Think about the crash that we just happened. So the idea that things will, just because they're listed in the United States, will be more richly valued, that's just not the case. It was the US investors, it was these sophisticated investors that pushed those share prices down 95% and then up 20 times after.
Yeah, look, I mean, when a CEO tells me that, my first question is, name one example of a biotech company or medtech company, Australian, and listed on the NASDAQ, and their valuation suddenly went up 10x. I have not seen a single positive spirit. Every single time I've seen that happen, it's been negative. And I guess I will actually name a company as an example, Bionomics. So they were listed on the ASX, ran a phase 2B trial. So this goes back to the Syntara question about developing your own drugs. Their phase 2B failed in Australia because the drug was not bioavailable. When you took it, they gave it in this like suspension. When you took it, it wasn't getting absorbed with food. And man, that was a big miss for that company. But so that company went through some gyrations and is now listed on the NASDAQ. They've redone the phase 2B, highly statistically significant in PTSD. First drug that is shown to be highly statistically and clinically meaningful in PTSD since the 80s. It's quite amazing, right? And they've got more data in social anxiety disorder. All of it is positive. And yet, so the stock goes up on the day that it's positive. And now today, the stock price is below where it was when the phase 2 result came out. The NASDAQ, unless you're a $5 billion company, the NASDAQ is just as inefficient as the ASX, right? If you cannot get the eyeballs, you cannot get the eyeballs in the NASDAQ unless you're a billion, at least $1 billion company, right? In Australia, you can when you're a $500 million company or $200 million company. I have never seen a positive example of dual listing or relisting on the NASDAQ suddenly resulting in a massive valuation uplift. And the other thing I'll comment is the CEO go, oh, look at the valuation of my company, look at the valuation of this other company that has the same thing. I'm undervalued. Well, I think what they don't understand is my investable universe is not those two companies, right? Or I don't have to have a position in that disease state. Like I don't have to invest in TAVR, or I don't have to invest in GLP-1. If there are two companies, one is a $10 million company and one is a $500 million company, there usually is a good reason for it, right? One of them might be approved on the market making lots of money and the other one is not. But my kind of decision making process on valuation is that company that's 500 million, that's 65 patients, or Syntara, there's hundreds of patients, phase 2 trial, potentially going into a pivotal trial, that's a $13 million valuation. Rather, my investable universe is drugs, devices, private and public, Australia and New Zealand. There's nothing telling me that I need to have this particular company in my portfolio. And I think they miss that kind of understanding. And when they go to the US hoping to get that similar valuation, I've never seen it happen positively. And so I always caution management teams, particularly medtech management teams, from going to the US. I find that when you're commercially successful in Australia for medtech, you get a valuation premium to what you have in the US. So on your point about clinical trials, that's what I really love about Australia, right? So when I lead a US investor in my fund, USLP, I tell them that if you think about it on a purchasing power basis, an Australian company can do what a US company does for 20% of the money, right? And so the first thing is that the federal government is paying for 43.5% Mayo discount, right? That concept to US investors is wired. That's the R&D rebate, right? So if a company needs $10 million to do a clinical trial, the federal taxpayers pay $4.35 million of that. So my company only needs to raise about half. In addition to that, we don't have to get what's called an IND, which you have to do in the US. And so that is a huge cost saving. So for a cell therapy company in particular, that can be a $10, $20 million cost saving because you don't have to go through GMP manufacturing. Right? You can go into humans in Australia with non-GMP material. That's another huge cost saving and time saving because you don't need to do GLP, good for laboratory practices, toxicology trials. Now those trials don't cost that much, but they take time because often you have to do a 3-month rack, 3-month dog. Sometimes you might have to do a 9-month dog, and they just take a lot of time, right? You can't speed up a 9-month toxicology trial. Takes 9 months plus the plan. Now, and you don't have to do that in Australia to go on a clinical trial. The clinical trial approval process in Australia is completely decentralized. You do a notification with the federal authority, the TGA, and then it's side-by-side HREC approval, Human Ethics Review Committee approval. And that, they just look at it on a risk reward. What's the risk to the patient? What might be the potential benefits to the patient? And it's much, much easier, much simpler. And when you actually start the clinical trial, the CT scan in Australia, probably a fifth of what the price in the US, MRIs can be 10th, physician time or hospital time, everything is cheaper than the US. But we have an ethnically diverse population that mirrors much of the developed world, right? Mirrors much of Europe, mirrors much of the US. And so you can actually take a drug in Australia, phase 1 and phase 2A, before you have to worry about going into a large clinical trial and going to see the FDA. So a company can get to that stage for a fraction of the cost that a US company can. And so as a VC, I don't have to spend all this money doing manufacturing and animal toxicology trial and all of these things that are no value but must be done in the US. So my money can be spent on value. So I want to find out as quickly and as cheaply as possible am I getting an efficacy signal in humans with this disease? And you can do that in Australia. And so that's why, I think Australia is the best market in the world to do drug development. And because of all these benefits, companies from all around the world come to Australia. We have the world's best clinical trial infrastructure. We can do phase 1 and phase 2 trials cheaper, faster than any other country in the world. And, all this government support and R&D and government grants, all these things mean that surprisingly, we have a lot of companies at the discovery. We have an incredible amount of IP. So for an investor, people ask, well, what's the investable universe? Do you have lots of opportunities? The answer is yes, right? The government has decided, 10 years ago, that this is a center that they want to support, and they continue to support that. And we have so many PhDs and medics graduating from Australian universities that are world-class. We have research institutions in Australia that are world-class. Garvin, that we hired to name 2 at absolute world-class research institute. So when you're an investor at my stage, my issue is not deal flow. My issue is getting these companies fully funded, right? Like if a company needs 15 million, 20 million to do a phase 2, I can absolutely love the company, but if I can't fully fund the company, where do they raise the rest of their money? So we go out to other people, try to syndicate these deals. But that's the hardest part in the sector, not access to deals. So, I think, I think we do a better job than any other country in the world. Only place we're lacking is venture capital, is dollars under management by specialist healthcare investors that can fully fund these companies. So these companies often get to a certain stage when they feel they have to either list, which is often horrible for a company if you list them on the R&D stage, or flip up to the US. And flipping up to the US and press the hub, right? With all these taxpayer dollars, all these innovation done in Australia, and we give away all the value to the US. But hopefully, I mean, that is changing. And, if we have more funds like us and like yourself, I can support those companies, we can keep this innovation in Australia.
Why don't we wrap up there, Hashan? So if people are interested in your fund, is there anything else people should know?
Yeah, so the fund structure is a VCLP for the eligible venture company investments and a unit of trust for everything that's not really the listed stuff. And so the biotech development takes years, right? It takes 2 to 3 years. If you look at our past, historically, we've been able to enter and exit a company in about 3 years. So that's how long it takes to run a phase 2 trial, and then subsequently acquired or the value change in that company. So we call capital when we invest and we return capital when we exit. But the fund is a 10-year fund. So there's no liquidity for 10 years unless we exit. So we think that based on the companies that we've invested in, the companies that we're looking at, the vast majority of capital we return to investors, starting at the 3rd year, but by the 5th year. But the minimum time you can have a venture capital fund in Australia is 10 years. Venture capital act is very kind of black and white with that. And so investors should think about really, once goal capital, the capital being with us for at least 3 years before we get to a point where that investment matures and we return the capital back to investors. And so the reason why we structured it that way is we believe that this is the best structure to exploit these opportunities. And the last thing we want to do is create a structure that is actually easy to raise capital, but then creates a horizon mismatch between the underlying investments and the investors. And we don't want to be in a position where people are trying to get liquidity and we have to fire sell assets. Like that, I think sets everyone up to fail. And we don't want to do that. So we appreciate it might be harder to raise fund money with a fund with a 10-year life, but we think it is the best structure to invest in this asset class. And so investors should be aware of that upfront because it's not going to be favorably. So you said wholesale only. And we've got an incredible amount of deal flow, which we can share with anyone that's interested. We think there's significant co-invest opportunity. As I was complaining about before, the biggest concern for us is probably funding these companies. So there is significant co-invest available with these companies that we're looking at. Yeah, so that's kind of the fund. As you said earlier, we've done 3 investments. The investors in the fund, which I should mention as well, the vast majority of our money is from healthcare people. For the large part, it's from biotech entrepreneurs who we've invested in. So the chairman in Europe, Patrick Davies, Rick Bonaccio was on the board of Sonic and raised by the biotech investors. Dr. Glenn Hafer, who sold his business to Helios. A few of the people at Therapeutics are also investors in the fund. So these are people that have seen our DD on the other angle. We're investing in their companies, can kind of vouch for our skill set. And there's some quotes and FR articles from some of these people kind of backing up our ability to pick winners in this space. And I think that says a lot to potential investors that look at investors. The foundational capital for us has come from healthcare entrepreneurs that have become very, very successful.
Great, Hashan. I'm excited. Looking forward to collaborating in the future as well.
Thanks for having me on, Michael.
Thanks for coming on.